Hello everybody, you're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host Dane Cobain. This is the weekly radio show where we chat about the local arts news. We have a different guest on each week. We head over to the Rhylight Zone for a short story and or some poetry. And we catch up with Twangling Jack Ford over in the York Shed for a weekly album review. As always, you can find us on Facebook. If you search for The Art Show on Wickham Sound, you should be able to find us. We are repeated on Wickham Sound on Monday nights. We're on the Wickham Sound Listen Again, iTunes, Spotify and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please do leave us a short review on your podcast platform of choice. And you can reach out to me here at the studio on dane.cobain at wickhamsound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain at wickhamsound.org.uk. And for this week's entry into the Rhylight Zone, we're going to have the first part of a piece of fiction called The Death of the Author by Kevi, who's a former guest on the show.
The Wilhelmina Murders. Death of the Author by Kevi. Cover designed by Devin Tarkavian. Did you hear that J.K. Rowling died? I'm not sure what reaction I expected from Wilhelmina when I told her the news. She sat unchanged for a moment, then a smirk formed on the edges of her lips. After a while, she let out a chuckle, which quickly developed into uncontrollable laughter. I could do nothing but stare at her with disgust. Rowling's untimely death was a tragedy. Her fantasy series defined entire generations of children, and in an instant, she was taken from us. J.K. Rowling is dead, and Wilhelmina laughed. As Will regained her composure, she asked, "How did she die? Did she jump off a cliff with the rest of her turf friends?" No, Willie. She was murdered. This time, she had the decency not to laugh in my face, simply responding, "Oh, damn. I need you to investigate this case. Find out who killed her." Wilhelmina was dumbfounded. "Absolutely not," was all she said. "But Willie," I pleaded, "a beloved children's author was murdered, and the entire world is grieving. With your help, the killer can be brought to justice, and everyone can have closure." "Beloved?" Wilhelmina's face became deep red, and she went on, "That is despicable. She has devoted the last several years of her life to leading a crusade against transgender people. She has convinced thousands that we are nothing but violent predators, a threat to cisgender women. That woman has used her enormous platform to incite hate and violence. Trans women being murdered on the street, mass shootings at queer bars. J.K. Rowling has instigated these targeted acts of violence, fanning the flames of bigotry. Anyone who supports transgender people should know that she is not someone to be celebrated." I let her say her piece, then suggested, "I get that you have your reasons for disliking her, but can you please do this anyway? For my sake, at least. Her stories meant everything to me as a child. I would hope that our friendship means more to you than some overhyped books." I could barely utter a word before she threw me out. The next day, Wilhelmina went to Boys Town for a drag brunch. She imbibed on bottomless mimosas and tipped all the queens, giving a few extra bucks to transgender drag queen Gertrude Philistine, who performed Ding Dong the Witch is Dead, mixed with clips of J.K. Rowling's controversial comments. After the show, Willie and Gertie stumbled down the block to the beauty salon and got their nails done, fingers and toes. When they'd finished up there, they went back to Gertrude's place, where the two of them made out while news coverage of Rowling's murder played on the television behind them. Did they take things further? I certainly don't want to know. So why would you, perv? What was I doing during this time? Well, stewing mostly. When I wasn't bawling my eyes out during the Harry Potter movie marathon, I was pacing around perplexed, begrudging Wilhelmina her refusal to help me in my time of need. By the third day of these behaviors, I realized that while I sat idle, no progress was being made in the investigation into Rowling's death. So I set about to do it myself. I gathered up all the evidence I could find online and read it over and over until I had it committed to memory. Then I sat back, allowing the wheels of thought to turn, but quickly realized they had no traction. Wilhelmina was the one with the brain for this. There wasn't a chance I could solve it without her. Resigned to my course of action, I made the walk of shame back upstairs and knocked at her apartment door. The door was opened by Wilhelmina's visitor, Gertrude, wearing nothing but a silk robe several sizes too big for her, barely held together with a half-assed knot. It didn't cover anything. There was a beauty mark, right in the deep V of her hips, which pulled the eye down and tempted one to look even lower. She was enormously gifted. If I'm being honest, I couldn't keep myself from staring, as I felt my mind processing the incongruity of this well-endowed person who also had an incredible rack. I may be gay, but anyone can appreciate a nice bosom. Gertrude let out a deep cough after what must have been several minutes, and I remembered my mission. I pushed my way through the door and found Wilhelmina scantily clad in her bed. It wasn't my first time seeing her like this, so I continued unfazed. I walked right up to the side of the bed, then she spoke. "I really don't want to see you right now." "I know you're busy," I said, trying to keep my voice even, "and you're still mad about the other night, but I'm not ready to apologize. A woman has been murdered. We owe it to her to solve this case."
That was part 1 of Death of the Author by Say Kevy. You're listening to the Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound, and this is Straight 8 with their version of My Girl.
I've got sunshine on a cloudy day. When it's cold outside, I've got the month of May. I guess you say, what can make me feel this way, my girl? I'm talking about my girl. I've got my girl, my girl.
my girl,
She's my girl, my girl.
my girl.
She's my girl.
You can feel the shock wave of my heart. You can also tear my world and skies apart. Explosion of emotions. Your contamination will forever last. No radioactive smog will always cloud over my path. Our love is like black rain, freezing just before the pain. Our love is like nuclear fallout, infectious, volatile, full of doubt. Our love is like emission radio, dangerously we've gone full spectrum. Our love is like a disease so coming, unstable, fatal, so atomic. Your method of delivery comes in different forms. I try to duck and cover as you swing your chemical claws. Increase the size of your arsenal and expand your yield. Expand your yield. I'll fade one that we both share. Surely seal. Surely seal. Our love is like black rain, freezing just before the pain. Our love is like nuclear fallout, infectious, volatile, full of doubt. Our love is like emission radio, dangerously we've gone full spectrum. Our love is like a disease so coming, unstable, fatal, so atomic. Our love is like black rain, freezing just before the pain. Our love is like nuclear fallout, infectious, volatile, full of doubt. Our love is like emission radio, dangerously we've gone full spectrum. Our love is like a disease so coming, unstable, fatal, so atomic.
That was Nuclear Love by Humans Can't Reboot, and before that we had Straight 8 with their version of My Girl. You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain. And it's time now for us to be joined by this week's guest, who is Sean McNulty of Auraist. Awesome. So the first question is one that I ask everybody, and I think you'll have an interesting answer to this one, given what we're going to talk about today, which is, what was the last book that you read, and what did you think of it?
Okay, the honest answer to that is Ghosts of My Life by Mark Fisher, which is not a book that I was checking out for Auraist. I was just reading it because I'm a real admirer of Mark Fisher. He passed away 6 years ago, and he would probably be my favourite English cultural commentator of this century. In the interviews that we send out on Auraist to the writers that we've chosen, I quote something that Mark Fisher speaks about a lot, which is the death of popular modernism. This is both him, you know, the music journalist Simon Reynolds. Simon Reynolds brought out a book 10 years ago called Retromania. And both Simon Reynolds and Mark Fisher campaigned vociferously against retro. They really, really despised retro, mainly in the fields of music and literature, cinema as well, a little bit. Would you be familiar with that term, popular modernism?
No, I was going to ask you. So can you define that for us?
Sure. So Mark Fisher's definition of that would be in contrast to high modernism in the early part of the 20th century. The modernism part that he takes is make it new. Okay, in the arts, you have to make it new. But it's popular modernism in the sense that you're making it new, you're progressing the art form, but you're doing so in a way that is accessible to as many people as possible. The classic example would be the Beatles. Yeah, by tens of millions across the planet, but constant innovation. And Mark Fisher, his belief was that, largely supported by the British state, the decades, say, from the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, were the decades of popular modernism. And not coincidentally, they also would have coincided with the decades in the UK of high taxation, fairly progressive left-wing politics. And his belief is that, connected with the reimposition of more right-wing politics from the 1980s onwards, in our century, the 21st century, popular modernism has all but died. Not died off completely, but the dominant idea, say, in popular music, say in post-punk, for example, or the genre that I am fondest of, dance music, house and techno and drum and bass and so on, those scenes were completely obsessed by the idea of making it new. They were classic examples, again, of popular modernism. And this applies in literature as well, that, the pressure that artists would have felt in previous decades, that if they're not really doing anything new, they're kind of irrelevant. Yeah. Again, it was a message that was also really pushed really hard by the music press in the UK. And that idea that the demise of popular modernism is one of the key ideas lying behind Auraist. Because when we try to, I'm sure we'll be speaking about this quite soon, but when we try to identify the best written books of the month or on a particular prize shortlist, one of our criteria would be originality. We really do value originality in prose, and we really don't like the type of prose that really just tries to sound like everything else. I hope that would give you a sense. So I've been reading Mark Fisher fairly solidly the last few years, and his autobiography, Ghosts of My Life, was the last book I read.
Awesome, cool, yeah. No, lots of food for thought there. And again, I think you see that a lot in pretty much every art form. I mean, the example I would point to, like, particularly with Hollywood at the moment, it seems as though every movie, you've got the superhero movies, which I have views on that anyway, but also a lot of remakes and retellings of stories that we all know, because people know that they will sell well, but it's not necessarily, again, creating something new. So yeah, it's interesting again to hear you talk about that, with the crossover between music and literature as well, which I think you're uniquely placed to talk about. We'll talk a little bit more about music later on.
Sure.
But yeah, so can you give us the sort of elevator pitch for what Auraist is? And you've kind of covered the what you seek to do with it, but what exactly is it?
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, every month we choose the best written book, not the best book, but the best written book in literary fiction, crime fiction, speculative fiction, and non-fiction. So those posts come out every month, and we also pay a lot of attention to the prize shortlists. So, say a prize, the recent one was for the Centre for Fiction First Novel Prize over in the States, which was announced last night. So we would look at the shortlist, and then we would choose not the best book on the shortlist, which is what the prize itself does. We try to identify the best written book. Now, of course, best written, a lot of people have found that expression a little bit contentious. So we've tried to explain in quite a bit of detail on the Auraist Substack exactly what we mean by best written. one of the ways that we've done that is by contrasting it with really what we don't like. And we've used the expression the replicant voice to represent the type of prose that we really don't value at all. It's probably at its worst in non-fiction. 80% of non-fiction is written in what Steven Pinker has called the classic style. It's that style that everybody's familiar with, that 80% of non-fiction books are written in. That's been dominant for the last 70 or 80 years. A journalistic style, it has parallels with academic writing, where a lot of the personality, individuality has been removed from that prose style. I just find it boring. I've read so many books written in that style that it just sends me to sleep. And the problem maybe isn't quite so as extreme in fiction, but there is a problem there as well. And it's maybe not 80%, but again, that replicant voice, it's a style where it almost doesn't feel as if there's a human being writing this. And especially nowadays, the last two or 3 years, it reads like AI. It reads as though AI could actually have written it. So that's, we set out quite clearly that that's what we're not looking for. And then the qualities that we do value, we've set that out in quite a bit of detail. But it is subjective. I think it was Martin Amis said that it's simply not possible to prove that one sentence or a couple of lines of poetry are superior to another couple. You can make all the arguments you wish, but it's not something that can be objectively proved. So we rely a lot on quotation. We would choose, say, the best written literary fiction novel of the month, but we would also send out a reasonably sized extract from the novel so that our readers can judge for themselves. And the publishers have been very generous with us in giving us permission to send out longer extracts, maybe a few thousand words, so that our readers can get a good sense of the quality of the prose. So the best way we try to defend our choices is just through quotation, through these extracts, and let the readers make their own mind up.
Yeah. And kind of allowing the work to speak for itself, I suppose. And you mentioned the that sort of the popular sort of the style of writing that you get a lot in non-fiction. I would call it like, it's like beige writing. Or like flavorless food. Maybe it's good enough to get the job done if you just want to learn. The example I keep giving is I read a book on raising backyard chickens, and it wasn't particularly well written. It had the information I needed, so it's fine for that purpose. And I wondered like how your picks compare to something like the Goodreads Choice Award, which is based purely on popularity.
Sure. We are niche, and our niche is the quality of the sentences. That would really be the difference between us and not just the Goodreads Choice Award, but pretty much everything else that's out there in the online literary sphere. As far as I'm aware, we're the only people who are doing this. And the reason why we set it up was because it was something that I was looking for myself. I have to admit, I do have a bit of an attitude about this kind of stuff, but, years and years of reading books and having to put them down after 5 pages, 10 pages, because of that beige prose that you just mentioned. And I just wonder, what is there something out there? Is there some site, some group of people who will just identify the best written books so that to save me time? So to save me and people like me who value the writing. And I searched everywhere for something like that, and it just didn't exist. So that was it. That was the motivation behind setting the project up. And we have been very gratified with the response that we've had. It's going much better than expected. We got a little bit lucky with a couple of things that have happened. Paul Lynch, who won the Booker Prize, maybe about a month or so before the Booker Prize was announced, he gave off his time. He was very short of time, in the build-up to the Booker being announced, gave us wonderful written interview responses This is the thing that we do with our interviews. We prefer to have our writers to write their answers because these are prose experts, and so do they. It seems as though that's what they prefer to do. And that's been another extremely pleasant surprise, is the sky high standard of the responses that we've been getting from these prose experts. So, we just have to admit, getting that piece from Paul Lynch was extremely lucky. That has ended up opening all kinds of doors for us. I think maybe a couple of writers who might have been reluctant to contribute pieces to Auraist, when they heard that the Booker Prize winner had done a piece with us very early on, they were much more enthusiastic about doing pieces for us, and it sort of snowballed from there. But we have to accept that we did get lucky on that one.
You're listening to the Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm here in conversation with Sean McNulty of Auraist, and this is the MLN Ensemble with Hectic.
When I arrived it was hectic, Britain, way before Brexit Britain. I wasn't accepted at school, I skipped class without telling my parents, I kept it hidden. Listened to beats, perfected rhythms, and gave me a sense of direction that kept me driven. While they slept I didn't, step by step I direct my vision conflicted. Abstract, corridors, packed bags, can you fit them all in a hatchback? Are we laughing with them or we laughed at? That's back when Sony Ericsson with a speaker was the cool flex. Hoping to be immortalized in the drawings on my school desk. Manifesting dreams out of pencil cases. Don't ask me what my mental state is. Growing up I would vent on pages. Nowadays I get sent on stages. Wait, manifest dreams out of pencil cases. Don't ask me what my mental state is. Moving forward at 10 paces. Yeah, I like to reminisce. A new vision full of throwbacks. I was too Polish for the Brits, but too British for the Polacks. Huddled up in a standard flat. Doesn't matter where you've landed at, cause a friend once told me home is where you hang your hat. Observe everything, best believe Sammy is learning. Still remember the day we got on a plane with no plan of returning. Sorry mother if I travel with you, I can be a burden. Yeah, but you carry the burden, you carried it, I know. There's no barriers, I close. You taught me how to balance out them lows. We try our best, it shows. Yeah, we try our best, it shows. We try our best, it shows. Stressed but wouldn't tell him since I was 11. So shit, yes, I'm a wellin', but I embrace it, never yelling. It's in the jeans, it's in the denim. Which direction are we heading? Nicking out of school with some mates back then. The teachers caught me blemming. Internalized a lot of emotions, I was dealing with my venom. That's one from the memory box, setting me off. Some come over and send money back home to find out happiness will never be bought. I've got the same mindset that got Kennedy shot. These words can cut through these ebony logs. You either see friends or enemy squads. See, everything's relative.
That was the MLN Ensemble with Hectic. And it's time now for us to be rejoining conversation by this week's guest, who is Sean McNulty of Auraist. And you mentioned again, so some of the, Paul Lynch being the classic example, but you've talked to a fair few experts and you've got some more hopefully coming up. Who are some of the people that you've talked to and that you hope to be talking to soon?
Okay, so the interview or the piece, the written piece after Paul's was by Escor David Johnson, who was nominated for that Centre for Fiction's first novel prize. He didn't win it, but we really, really rate that novel and his piece on prose style, entirely on prose style. It was 5,000 words, so we sent it out over a couple of emails. There was a piece that went out today from the speculative fiction writer Lavi Tidhar. Again, quite a detailed piece, 6,000 words, on various aspects of prose style, who these writers would regard as the best modern stylists. And a question I'm particularly keen to speak to them about is their pet peeves, things, stylistic issues that really irritate them. So that's been quite entertaining, getting those responses from the writers. The next one, I think, will be the fantasy writer, Nicola Griffith. She has also submitted an amazingly high quality piece. And the one after that will be Anna Della Subin. Her book Accidental Gods is a non-fiction book which was nominated as the best book of 2023 by various mainstream publications. And then further down the line, we've got Rob Doyle, the Irish writer Rob Doyle, whose novel Threshold I rate as one of the best written novels of the century, and a Scottish writer, Ryan O'Connor, who wrote a book called The Voids, that again I regard as one of the best written of the century. Those are the only two so far that we've contacted just because we really admire their books, not because it's connected with any prize shortlist or recent releases. And there's another writer, H. Gareth Gavin. Have you heard of him? His novel Never Was nominated for the Goldsmiths Prize. That's probably the strongest shortlist that we've looked at this year. That was very high quality. The Goldsmiths Prize is for innovative fiction, popular modernism again.
Yeah.
And H. Gareth Gavin didn't win that prize. Ben Myers won it with Cuddy. But that book, Never Was, is very unusual for me to even think that an author might be a genius. That thought only occurs to me maybe every 5 years or so. But I think it's possible that H. Gareth Gavin might be a genius. The quality of the writing in that novel is as good as any British publication in the last 10 years, I think. Yeah. Very, very, very special publication. So I think he's going to be doing a piece for us as well. Awesome. Yeah, those are the main ones coming up over the next month or so.
Cool. And I mean, again, speaking of the next month or so, I mean, at the time of chatting to you and also when this goes out, we're coming towards the end of 2023. With that, everyone's going to be doing their, end of year lists, things like that. Are you doing anything similar? And, what will you be looking out at other people's end of year lists? What are you going to be doing around that?
That was the plan originally. We thought we would be looking at the recent releases, the prize shortlists, and then the end of year lists. But we changed our mind about that because having looked at the end of year lists, we've already looked at all of these books. This is the thing, is for each individual pick, say for the best non-fiction book of the month, we're already looking through maybe 15 or 20 books for that. So over the course of the year, we're reading quite a lot of books. So we were coming to the end of year lists and there isn't really any point in this. What we will do maybe in about a week or so is we'll put out a post of all the best books, the best written books of 2023 in the various genres. That should be maybe next Wednesday or so. That'll be sent out.
Yeah. Well, and that must, show you that you're doing something right. That when it comes to the end of year list, you're like, oh, we've already done all of these. So there's no, you're not getting to December and having to sweep up and pick up all the books that you've missed.
One of the aspects lying behind this project is I got fed up listening to myself complaining to my friends. I'm Scottish. Yeah. We tend to complain about things quite a bit. And on this particular issue of the quality of prose, I was going on and on and on to my friends, and probably getting as bored as they were with it. I just wanted to go through, the books that were being put out by mainstream publishers and some of the indies as well, just in a much more methodical way. And maybe just to stop myself complaining, to make more of an effort to find the really specially written books like Never Was, and it's worked. There have been a few that more methodical approach has thrown up a few surprises. My impression had been that this century, that the quality of prose in crime fiction had increased across the board quite a bit, where perhaps in speculative fiction that hadn't really happened. And I've discovered that I was wrong, absolutely wrong on that. The most disappointing, I hope you don't take offense at this, but the most disappointing genre has been crime. That's the one genre where quite a few months of the year we haven't actually found anything worth recommending. So we've just got stayed silent about that. That would be one thing that I would like to say to your audience is, if you have any suggestions of any particularly well written books, particularly in crime fiction, please contact us, and we'll be happy to take a look at it. But yeah, that was, whereas speculative fiction, the standard of the prose there, especially in fantasy, which I was quite surprised by this, has actually been much higher than I was anticipating. Literary fiction is strong. There maybe aren't as many geniuses floating around as maybe was the case, 50 or 70 years ago. But yeah, I've been pleasantly surprised by the quality of literary fiction.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I sort of secretly suspect there probably are as many geniuses. It's just that, there's more of a focus on actually being able to market yourself these days, so that they probably are still out there writing. It's just no one's heard of them because it's the person who's got 50,000 YouTube subscribers or whatever it is that gets the book deal, which is why I think it's good that you guys are able to, again, to cut through some of that marketing hype and go back to, well, is the writing any good,
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. And of course, we're not claiming that we are necessarily correct on all of this. We try to be quite upfront about our biases and our frustrations and where we are coming from and so on. And I mean, it's perfectly possible that there are some narrative geniuses floating around out there that I've missed because of my possibly quite narrow-minded focus on the prose, but that's just the way it is. I think myself and the other people involved in the project, we've just sort of accepted that this is the way we are. That we do have this bias, if you want to call it prose snobs, then so be it. But the first requirement is the quality of the writing. Then if we can get over that hump, then we can pay lots of attention to everything else that the books have to offer. But for us, for whatever reason of background or whatever, the sentences, the quality of the sentences has to be there first of all.
Yeah. And you mentioned, people getting in touch with you to let you know about any books that they think are deserving. I mean, you also have like your sort of like your affiliate sort of bounty sort of system going. How can people get involved in Auraist if they want to?
Okay, so if you go to Substack, the address is Auraist, so that's the word aura with IST at the end, and then .substack.com. That's the main site. That's where everything gets sent out for. Subscriptions are free. We're going to be keeping everything free for quite a while. Further down the line, we're going to be doing things like open calls. We'll maybe go to some of the big crime groups, crime fiction groups, and ask for submissions, specifically or particularly well written crime. And it'll be, if they're good enough, we would like then to put some of those indie authors, if we can, up against the mainstream published authors, and maybe do things like blind tests with our audience, where we're not going to say what the source of the book is and let the audience judge for themselves the quality of the prose, because we are keen. I mean, I really do suspect that there are real, stylistic geniuses out there. who the mainstream publishers have rejected. So we would be very keen indeed to identify those and present their books out alongside the more mainstream published books. Our Twitter is at Auraist Substack, but the main focus of the project is on Substack. And as I say, with the help of people like Paul Lynch and Nicola Griffith and the support from the writers, it has been going much better than we anticipated,
Cool. And just one question to end on, really. I normally ask my question is, what's next for you and where can people follow you to find out more? I think you've covered where people can follow you, where people can find you. So what have you got planned for Auraist going into 2024 and beyond?
Okay, so at the moment, as I mentioned, the main focus would be picking the best written books. We then contact the authors who wrote them, ask them to do these pieces for us, specifically on prose style. And then, as I mentioned, the publishers have been very generous and given us permission to send out longer extracts. We're going to supplement that next year with the open calls that I just mentioned. That's going to be a big part of it, maybe in about 2 or 3 months from now. Peter Murphy, who is the main face-to-face interviewer for Auraist, he's very experienced in the podcast world, like yourself. So that's a natural next step as well. That if Peter is already interviewing a lot of these authors, we'll be putting those out as podcasts. And maybe works in progress as well, from particularly well-written pieces from some of the authors that we have relationships with now. We would like to just send those out, send out 1,500 words by email. Those would be the main ones for the next 3 months. But the first 3 that I mentioned to you, the picks, the interviews, and then the longer extracts that we'll send out, I imagine that will always be the core of what we're doing.
Big thank you to Sean McNulty for joining me. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and this is Charlie Brind with his version of Take On Me by Aha.
Talking away, I don't know what to say. I'll say it anyway. Today's another day to find you shying away. I'll be coming for your love, okay? Take on me. Take me on. I'll be gone in a day or two. Needless to say, I'm odds and ends, and I'll keep stumbling away. Slowly learning life can be okay. Say it after me. There's no better to be safe than sorry. Take on me. Take me on. I'll be gone in a day or two. In a day or two.
You'd started work as a bank clerk. When the clouds of war appeared, you went to fight, thought that was right. You volunteered, you can't have feared what was to come. I'll never know what you saw. You see, I never went to war. I've got your medals in my drawer. I just wish you'd told me more. Put on a ship to distant lands. You fought in fields and on desert sands. First on the beach at Anzio. You had no choice. You had to go, you couldn't say no. I'll never know what you saw. You see, I never went to war. I've got your medals in my drawer. I just wish you'd told me more. What's it like to fire a gun, to be shot at or to shoot someone, to hear friends' cries, to see friends die, to wonder when you'll be home again? I'll never know what you saw. You see, I never went to war. I've got your medals in my drawer. I just wish you'd told me more. You got demobbed, went back to your job, working in a bank. No more mortar shells, and no more cordite smells. Just checks to exchange, paper to rearrange. Such a change. I'll never know what you saw. You see, I never went to war. I've got your medals in my drawer. I just wish you'd told me more. The respects you paid on Remembrance Day to the ones you left behind. Time to reflect, thoughts to recollect. You showed your pride, but kept so much deep inside. I'll never know what you saw. You see, I never went to war. I've got your medals in my drawer. I just wish you told me more.
That was I Wish You Told Me More by Peter Crutchfield. Before that we had Charlie Brind with his version of Take On Me by Aha. You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host Dane Cobain, and it's time for us to head over to the Ilk Shed now to catch up with Twangling Jack Ford for this week's album review.
Back to Black, Amy Winehouse. I remember seeing Amy Winehouse on Nevermind the Buzzcocks when she was promoting her first album. She seemed to be overdoing the bad girl act. But then I had seen too many acts with an album to promote misbehaving on TV, and Buzzcocks was mostly there for musicians and comedians to misbehave on. I remember reading about her change in style in a review of one of her gigs, probably in the Evening Standard. It said she was becoming less jazz and more 60s soul. There were pictures of her with a beehive hairdo, so I was interested to hear her new sound. The first song I heard on the radio was Rehab, and I was not so sure about the topic of the song, but I loved the sound. It was produced by Mark Ronson, who has been very much the flavour of this century so far. It had 60s sounds, but with a modern, clean production. The thing that particularly stood out was those deep pulsing saxophone stabs that pushed the beat. I took the CD out from the library and played it a lot, mostly for the music. I always listen to songs and music over singing. In places it is like early pre-funk James Brown. It has a touch of ska, Stax, Chess and Motown. It has catchy, well-sung melodies, but I'm not sure I took much notice of the lyrics. Her phrasing was always interesting. Syllables would disappear and parts of it would be incomprehensible, the meaning of the words being secondary to her spot-on, soulful vocal gymnastics. Not always comfortable, but unignorable. On Love is a Losing Game, she veers in a jazzy direction, a bit like Peggy Lee. Some of the tracks have a smoother Sound of Philadelphia feel, but it steers away from any kind of Hall & Oates AOR blandness. I saw her perform many times on TV. She had a shambolic look and would stand uneasily, nervously pulling at her dress. Because she always looked like she would miss her cue, but then always came in at exactly the right time, just like the record, it all looked like an act. The band were excellent with horns and dancing backing singers, and I was starting to really appreciate the songs like Back to Black and Tears Dry on Their Own. But I think it was when she played Glastonbury the shambles was no longer an act. The lyrics were sounding more sad. You found yourself siding with the people who wanted to send her to rehab. Then she died and it stripped away the joyous veneer of the music, and I did not want to listen to it again, till it was suggested I do this piece. Unlike Hendrix, Joplin, Morrison and Cobain, the music of Amy Winehouse changed when she died. It is now like listening to Clues. She made a great album, and that may have been down to the demons that killed her. But they may have killed her anyway. Amy Winehouse, Back to Black.
Big thank you to Twangling Jack Ford for this week's album review. Thank you to everyone whose music I've shared. As always, you can find us on Facebook. If you search for The Art Show on Wickham Sound, you should be able to find us. We are repeated on Wickham Sound on Monday nights. We're on the Wickham Sound Listen again, iTunes, Spotify and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please do leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice. It all helps. You can also reach out to me here at the studio by dropping me a line on dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. So I'm going to leave you with one last tune, and this is Frank Birtwistle with Reflections. I'll catch you next week.